The massive bald eagle hung upside down from the barbed wire fence, its 7-foot wingspan stretched against the Montana sky like a dark, desperate banner. Blood dripped slowly from its talon onto the frozen ground below. Tom Hendricks had seen countless tragedies in his 40 years as a wildlife ranger, yet nothing prepared him for what was about to unfold. Because when he looked into that eagle's eyes, he saw something that froze his blood: recognition. In this vast land of wilderness and silence, every rescue carried a story. But this would become the kind of animal story that defied reason, one that would remind the world that memory and gratitude can live far beyond human understanding. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees that November morning. By the time Tom arrived at the remote property near Glacier National Park, the bird had been hanging there for hours. Most animals would have surrendered long before. Yet this eagle, with piercing yellow eyes, refused to give in. Tom's years of service had taught him routine. Assess, sedate if necessary, cut the wire, treat the wound. Clinical, predictable. But as he stepped from his truck, he sensed that this would not be another ordinary animal story. The eagle's gaze locked on him with unmistakable intensity, as if it recognized something deep within his presence. What Tom didn't yet know was that this was no random accident. This eagle had crossed more than 60 miles through mountain wind and snow to find him. Not just any man, but the one who had once saved its life. And now, it carried a message. As Tom reached to steady the bird, the eagle went utterly still. Then it released a low, haunting call that rose from somewhere deep in its chest, a sound filled with memory and plea. And in that instant, Tom felt something he couldn't explain. Somehow, that call felt familiar. This story is inspired by true wildlife rescues, moments that prove the bond between humans and animals can last a lifetime. Tom's gloved hands moved quickly to free the eagle's talon from the barbed wire, but his mind was racing. That sound, the pattern, 3 short notes, 1 long, 2 short. It was too deliberate to be random, too deliberate to be instinct. It stirred a memory he hadn't touched in years, one that now trembled at the edge of his awareness. The wind swept across the plains, carrying pine scent and the promise of snow. Tom focused on the wire, careful not to deepen the puncture wounds. They were bad, but treatable. Yet something inside him whispered that this encounter wasn't about luck. It was about purpose. Eagles were not known for seeking humans. They were proud, solitary hunters, never dependent, never trusting. But this bird was breaking every rule of nature, staring at him with an expression that felt almost human. As he cut through the last twist of wire, Tom expected the creature to fight for freedom. Instead, it allowed itself to be lifted, calm and alert, resting heavily against his chest as though it knew he meant safety. The eagle's heartbeat pulsed steadily against his jacket. Again that sound, 3 short, 1 long, 2 short, echoed from its chest. Impossible. Familiar. The sound of a bond that shouldn't have existed. Tom felt a shiver run through him as he realized that sometimes what we call coincidence is just life's way of reminding us of promises we once made. He set the eagle gently on the ground. It stood there, wings half spread, watching him with the stillness of something waiting to be understood. Then, instead of flying away, it took 1 small hop closer to him, a gesture so subtle, yet so impossible, that Tom's world suddenly felt larger than science, like there was something unseen guiding the connection between them. Tom froze. In all his years, he had never seen an eagle willingly approach a human. They were survival embodied, majestic, wild, untamable. Yet this bird broke every instinct, hopping closer until it was only 2 feet away. Close enough that Tom could see every detail of its fierce beauty. The hooked beak, the bright yellow eyes, and a small marking above the left eye. A cluster of white feathers shaped like a star. His breath caught. The phone slipped from his gloved hand into the snow. That, Mark, he knew it. Memory flooded back like a winter river breaking through ice. 7 years ago, the wildfire, the nest, the 3 eaglets he had rescued from the burning pine tree. That summer, Montana had burned, thousands of acres gone. Tom had rescued dozens of birds of prey, but those 3 eaglets were different. Barely 4 weeks old, their feathers mottled brown and white, their cries etched into his memory. He had fed them by hand when they refused to eat, stayed after hours at the rehabilitation center, and whistled a pattern his late father had once taught him. 3 short, 1 long, 2 short. It calmed them. It connected them. One eaglet, bold and fearless, had been the first to trust him. The one with the star-shaped marking. Tom had named him Zeus. He'd been there the day Zeus and his siblings were released, watched them rise into the blue, knowing it was goodbye. Or so he thought. Now, standing before him, blood-stained and trembling but alive, was Zeus, fully grown, magnificent and unmistakably aware of who Tom was. Tom's heart pounded. "Zeus," he whispered. The eagle fell silent, then took 1 step closer, touching his knee with a wingtip. Then it lowered its head. A gesture not of submission, but of recognition and trust. Every law of nature screamed this was impossible. Eagles weren't supposed to remember humans, not after 7 years, not across 60 miles. But reality seemed irrelevant now. Tom didn't need science to tell him what his heart already knew, Zeus remembered. Then Zeus raised his head and called again, the pattern sharper, urgent, shifting slightly at the end. Tom's ranger instincts took over. This wasn't just reunion. It was communication. A direction. Zeus spread his wings despite the pain, pointing northeast, toward the mountain range on the horizon. Something out there needed help. Tom followed Zeus's gaze toward the distant peaks, the same region where the eagle had been released years earlier. A chill that had nothing to do with the cold ran through him. Could Zeus have come all this way to bring him back there? It defied logic. It demanded reasoning beyond what any textbook would allow. Yet Tom had witnessed too many wonders to ignore the possibility. Some connections, he thought, are written in instinct rather than ink. A pickup approached from the road. Gerald. Richardson, the farmer who owned the land, climbed out, his weathered face lined from decades of winters. "That one looks rough," he said. "You think he'll make it?" Tom nodded, eyes on the eagle. "He's tougher than he looks." "Tell me, Gerald, seen other eagles around here lately?" Gerald thought for a moment. "Yeah, 4 or 5 flying over the northeast ridge the last few days. Don't usually see that many together. Just forest and that old fire lookout tower out there." 4 or 5 together. It's unusual. Tom's pulse quickened. The clues aligned like pieces of a map. Zeus wasn't lost, he was leading. "Gerald, mind if I check that ridge? Something tells me there's more to this than a fence accident." "Take my ATV," Gerald said. "You've got that look, Tom, like when you smell trouble before anyone else does." Tom gently placed Zeus into a transport crate in his truck. Most eagles fought confinement, but Zeus entered calmly, eyes steady on Tom's face, as though understanding this was the path forward. It wasn't submission, it was trust. Tom secured the crate and glanced toward the horizon. "All right, old friend. Whatever you're trying to show me, I'm listening." He drove across the frozen fields, the mountains looming larger with every mile. The closer he got, the stronger the feeling grew that this wasn't just a rescue. It was destiny repeating itself. 20 minutes later, the fire lookout tower appeared against the pale sky. An old wooden structure from the 1950s, long abandoned. Tom had visited it once years ago. It had been empty then, but not today. 4 eagles circled above, their cries echoing through the valley in rhythmic unison. Territorial birds didn't gather like this. Something was holding them here. Tom released Zeus from the crate. The bird stepped out and tilted his head upward, answering the calls with sharp precision. The circle above tightened. The atmosphere thickened with purpose. Then Tom saw the ground, blood traces near the base of the tower, drag marks leading up the stairs. Something, or someone, had fought to survive here. His instincts screamed caution, but Zeus called again, insistent, urgent. Tom's hand went to his radio, then paused. Every part of him wanted to call for backup. Every rational thought told him to wait. But the chorus of eagles above felt like an alarm he couldn't ignore. He tightened. His coat, grabbed his first aid kit and began to climb. Each step creaked under his boots. The tower groaned in protest. Zeus's cries rose and fell like commands, urging him higher. When he reached the door, the smell hit first. Blood, infection, desperation. Inside, curled in the corner, lay another bald eagle, larger, female, her left wing twisted at an impossible angle. She was still alive, her chest rising in shallow breaths. Beneath her wing, pressed close for warmth, were two eaglets, no older than a month. Tom froze. The realization hit like a blow. The female was dying, the chick starving. She had dragged herself here for shelter, using the last of her strength to shield her young. Without intervention, they would all be gone within hours. And suddenly Tom understood. Zeus hadn't come for help, he had come for them. Tom spoke softly, his voice a low current of calm. The female eagle lifted her head slightly, eyes glazed but aware. She was fading fast, broken wing, deep talon wounds, blood loss. Every breath was a battle. He had seen scenes like this before, but never one that carried so much meaning. Zeus's mate had fought a predator, perhaps a golden eagle. She had won, but at a terrible price. When she could no longer reach the nest, she had made a final decision, to crawl here, to protect her young, and to wait. And somehow she had called out across miles, her mate answering, carrying that desperate message back to the only human he trusted. Zeus had remembered the man who had once lifted him from fire and wire. He had remembered the sound of safety, the whistle of hope. And when his world fell apart, he flew those impossible miles to find Tom again. Tom radioed the rehabilitation center. His words came fast, clipped with urgency. He needed a vet, transport, fluids, 4 eagles, 2 critical, adults. Maria Chen, the coordinator, recognized the tone in his voice and mobilized a team. Estimated arrival, 90 minutes. He didn't have 90 minutes. The female's breathing was shallow, her eyes dimming. Tom made a choice. He knelt beside her, pulling out an emergency IV kit. It was beyond protocol, but he'd seen enough life slip away to know hesitation could kill. With steady hands, he inserted the line. Fluid began to flow. Her breathing steadied. He fed the eaglets next, small amounts, of warmed formula from a syringe. They accepted eagerly, the will to live flickering back into their tiny bodies. The mother's eyes followed his every move. She understood. Outside, the circling eagles kept watch, guardians of the sky, holding vigil over one of their own. As Tom worked, he felt something shift inside him. This was more than rescue. It was a mirror, of loyalty, of family, of faith in something unseen. Zeus had remembered his kindness, and in doing so, reminded Tom of the power of never giving up. 87 minutes later, the helicopter touched down near the ridge. Maria Chen and Dr. James Whitmore led the team up the slope with crates and medical kits. They moved with precision and purpose, born from years of experience, but nothing could prepare them for what they were about to see. Inside the tower lay the wounded mother, the eaglets, and Tom beside them. Outside, Zeus stood silent near the entrance, his golden eyes following every movement. Even Whitmore, hardened by decades in the field, paused. "I've never seen devotion like this," he murmured. "Let's move," Tom said. "We're running out of time." The team stabilized the female. Broken wing, deep lacerations, dehydration, but the IV had bought precious time. They transferred her into a heated transport crate. Her eyes fluttered open, locking on Zeus through the open doorway. He called softly in reply, and she relaxed, surrendering to care. The eaglets were next, both alive, both hungry, both stronger than expected. "They'll make it," Whitmore said. "You saved them just in time." Tom exhaled for the first time in hours, but he wanted Zeus to see what they had done, to understand that his mission had succeeded. He asked Maria to bring Zeus's crate up to the tower platform. When it was set down, Tom opened it halfway, just enough for the eagle to see inside. Zeus peered through the narrow gap, watching as his mate was lifted into safety and his children were secured in warmth. Then he released a sound unlike any call Tom had ever heard, soft, resonant, filled with relief. It was gratitude made audible. Tom closed the crate gently. "You did it, Zeus. You saved them." And for the first time in years, he felt something bloom inside him. A quiet belief that maybe the world wasn't as broken as it seemed. As the helicopter lifted off, Tom looked back at the tower. 4 eagles alive. a miracle carved from instinct, trust, and memory. 6 weeks later, Tom stood in the rehabilitation center's flight enclosure, watching Zeus soar from perch to perch. The talon wounds had healed completely. Aurora, Zeus's mate, named for the northern lights that painted the sky the night she was rescued, was strong again. Her wing had mended, her eyes shone bright, and the eaglets, now 8 weeks old, were learning to fly. Wild, defiant, alive. Tom often stood quietly at the fence reflecting. He had spent decades protecting wildlife, yet this experience had changed him. It reminded him that compassion creates echoes, that what we give freely can return when we least expect it. Sometimes the act of saving another life saves a part of our own. On a crisp December morning, they returned to the mountains. The sky blazed blue above the ridge. Tom opened Zeus's crate first. The great bird spread his 7-foot wings and launched into the air, circling once before climbing high. Aurora followed moments later, her flight steady, graceful, defiant against gravity. They met in the open sky, their paths weaving together in a silent reunion, their cries blending into something that felt like celebration. Tom watched until they vanished into the horizon, two souls bound by memory, love, and instinct. As the wind carried the sound of their calls across the valley, he realized that life often sends us reminders of who we once were, and if we listen closely, those reminders can lead us back to hope. Some stories remind us how powerful connection can be. This was one of them, a story of trust, courage, and redemption, a story that proves every act of kindness matters, because you never know when the life you saved might come back to save you.